That was River Run by Karlheinz Essl, performed by Min Wang and Karlheinz himself. The name of the piece is the first word of James Joyce's famous novel, Finnegan's Wake. In a sentence which took Joyce about 12 years to write, he writes, River Run, past Eve and Adams, from swerve of shore to bend of bay. The piece, as its name suggests, is a flow, a stream of sound passing through different shores and finally pouring to an open sea. These different shores represent different musical cultures and styles and historical eras. The piece is composed for guzheng, a Chinese instrument with about 2,500 years of history. The Chinese guzheng looks like a tiny boat itself, so in a way it is a boat floating on this river going through different kinds of music.
So I was invited to write a piece for traditional plucked instruments, and I had the choice between the Chinese guzheng, the Austrian zither, and the Finnish kantele. And because I already started 1 year before exploring the Chinese music history and tradition with another plucked instrument called pipa, I was very much interested to continue my research on that and to move to another instrument, which is the guzheng.
How long did it take you to develop the piece?
Yeah, it took quite long, because the first thing I understood was that the guzheng has a very long tradition, and it's not an instrument that's very easy to play. I just want to explain a bit how this instrument looks. It's a so-called zither instrument, so it has a wooden resonance board with 21 open strings, and each string is plugged and has a fixed pitch. There's no fret or fingerboard, so you more or less play on open strings, and by this you can achieve wonderful resonances. The thing is that on the guzheng you have a set of highly developed playing techniques which are impossible to learn in a short time. So the first thing I did was to buy an instrument and to improvise and find out what is possible on the instrument. By improvising, I found so many interesting melodies in this 25 pitch scale, which includes music that I found from Schubert. You can play parts of Leiermann, the Leiermann from Schubert there. Then I found some Gustav Mahler quotations from the Fifth Symphony. Even the beginning of the piano sonata of Armin Berg. And finally, a very famous rock riff from Deep Purple's Smoke on the Water. And then this idea with the river run became clear, so that with these four different, let's say, landscapes, Schubert, Mahler, Alban Berg, Deep Purple, this was, so to speak, my landscape. And I was sails on a boat. The boat was the guzheng, and the guzheng was floating down the river of sound through these landscapes of different musical styles, if you want. I forgot to mention that this piece is a piece, not a solo piece for guzheng, but for guzheng and computer, live electronic. Parallel, when composing or conceiving this composition, I wrote a computer program which takes the live input of the instrument, which is picked up with a contact microphone, and processes this in real time. So this is a piece where you need two players. One is playing the electronics, and the other one is the soloist who plays a precisely notated score. And also for the electronic part, there's a score, and I have to follow certain instructions. So it's fully notated, and it's not an improvisation, but there's a lot of possibility of interpretation and temporal freedom, so to speak, when you play the piece.
Can you explain a little bit how you worked with the musician, how you communicated with her, and how did you develop the piece together?
In our case, was that we improvised together on the instrument. So I was inviting her into my studio and showed her some things that I discovered, some playing techniques that I found, and also the tuning, of course. And then she showed me some things that she would do on the instrument. So there was a lot of mutual learning.
This is partially because she's also a composer herself, I assume, and she has another...
It's very helpful because she also understood the compositional side of this piece. And so we were acting on the same level. Yeah? It was not like I'm the composer and I'm the chief and you are the musician and you are fulfilling my instruction. It was really a communication on the same level. But in the end, I gave her a really a worked out score, which has no element of improvisation. It's completely notated, and because it tells a sort of story. There is a sort of hidden story, if you want.
So, more general question. You use a lot of algorithmic structures and techniques in your compositions. Would you say that feelings also have a place in your music?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is not a contradiction. Also, I'm using algorithms. It's not an end in itself. It's always a mean to create emotions and gestures and energy.
Another general question for you. Well, everybody changes in time and tastes develop in different directions. How would you say you have changed from a while ago? How has your taste changed?
The past lies back 40 years. So my first pieces were very much, it's longer, it's 50 years or something like that. So when I was a kid and a teenager, I was playing rock music and also composing pieces for my band. But I always had this idea of combining rock music with Baroque, so with ideas of counterpoint and very complex musical arrangements, which were inspired by bands like Genesis, Pink Floyd, or Gentle Giant. And later, when I became adult, so with 18 or 20, I was playing electric guitar, by the way. I changed the instrument and I went down to the bass and the double bass. And then I started to play a different musical style. It was jazz, so very traditional jazz, Riedelbook stuff, bebop, swing, all the repertory. It was very interesting because at this time when I played this music with my band, I learned a lot about harmony. And then in this time I was started to study music theory and composition at the MDW. And then when I passed the first Diplomprüfung, this is the same as today, so I had to choose another teacher. And my second teacher was Friedrich Zerha, who was at this time the most avant-garde composer in Austria, besides Roman Haubenstock-Ramati. And I came to Zerha with a sort of background of rock and jazz music and Baroque and interest in counterpoint. And he didn't like it. He said, well, that's not the music of our times. You have to get in contact with other music. What do you know about Viennese school, Schönberg, Alban Berg and Webern? And I say to him, I know nothing and I don't like this music. And then he said to me, okay, that's your decision, but if you want to study with me, you have to get in contact with this music. And at this point, I was completely disappointed and puzzled. I had a sort of blockade. I was not able to compose. So I told him that I'm completely blocked. And he said, okay, you don't need to compose. What you can do, you can also bring analysis of other pieces. Let's say from Viennese school. So he forced me to do that. And I took this as a chance. I could change the teacher or stop composition. Or I could take the challenge and say, okay, this is something that could bring me to new borders. So I accepted the challenge and started with the first string quartet of Alban Berg, Opus 3. And for me, this was really a big discovery, what I found there, because I understood that every note that was written there has its meaning and its position. Everything has a thematic, is part of the whole construction of the piece. It's a very, very dense and very emotional music, which is full of hidden mysteries. this was part of Alban Berg's obsession with numbers and with hidden stories and secrets. And I got completely into this so to speak, obscure world, and understood that all notes that he wrote have its necessity.
Who are your favorite composers? Who do you like especially?
Because I was also writing my doctoral thesis about Anton Webern, this is one of my heroes, but especially not his late works, although I wrote about his late string quartet, but I like especially the pieces that he wrote before the 12-tone technique was formulated. Those pieces which are not based on a certain system, which are completely open and free, and also very short and concentrated and dense and full of emotions. So Webern is one of my heroes, and another one is also Alban Berg, more than Schoenberg. And in the music after the Second World War, definitely Karlheinz Stockhausen, because for me he was not only writing a lot of challenging and interesting pieces and concepts, but he was also writing interesting theories that were accompaniments of his musical works.
Karlheinz, you teach as well, and I would like to know how do you choose people you invite to your seminars? How do you decide who could be interesting for the students?
Well, as you know, all my seminars are based on an annual theme, a motto, which I always try to find, sometimes years in advance. And then I try to think about people or composers, artists, musicians who could contribute to this field. And it's not always the questions that I invite people that are completely running on my own track. I also like people who are doing very different things. And because I also am interested in learning something from them.
So what's the general appeal in teaching for you? What is it that makes it so attractive?
To be honest, yes, I teach because I want to learn. I'm teaching since more than 20 years now. More than 10 years here at MDW, and before I was in Linz. And for me, teaching was also very helpful for me to formulate artistic ideas and to make them understandable, comprehensible for others. Also to learn. I learn from the questions of the students, and I learn from the challenge that they put on me. Because they ask questions and I often don't know the answer. But I say, maybe we find it together. And by this, I can also discover things that I did not know before.
What do you say you would do in order to preserve the personal style of students in composing when you teach to them, so that they won't necessarily try to become like you?
Well, for me, it's important to unfold the personality of the student and not to make the student as a projection of myself. My teaching concept is more that I say I try to act as a sort of mirror that can help the students to understand what they are doing, and also sometimes as somebody who provokes them to enter new paths that they didn't know before.
Do you have any general advice for young struggling composers who are trying to make their way in the world?
This is impossible to give a general question, a general answer to this question. But I think the most important thing is that they should be brave and able to extend their own limitation. So I expect from my students that they are adventurous, that they go into the unknown, into the void, and that they develop themselves as persons who are not just reproducing the same way of writing, but they are also bold enough to start always from zero and make something new and take a new perspective.
And finally, how are you getting along with the quarantine? How do your days look like? How do you spend your time?
Incredible time because I never had this before, and the most important thing is that I understood that it's not the time now to write the best symphony of the world, extend yourself, but to become silent, to listen, to become humble, and to ask questions: what is the essence